I was just an ordinary guy living in a suburban neighborhood with my wife, Sarah. We had been married for 5 years, and on the surface, everything looked great. We had a comfortable home, both had decent jobs, and even a dog named Max who always managed to lift our spirits. But lately, something felt off. At first, I chalked it up to the usual ups and downs of married life. But as days turned into weeks, I started noticing little signs that made my gut churn. Sarah had become distant. The playful banter that once filled our evenings had been replaced with long silences. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd give me vague answers, and if I pressed further, she'd roll her eyes, snapping back, "It's just work, okay?" It wasn't just her attitude, either. She had started getting ready to go out more often, claiming she was meeting up with her girlfriends. I thought it was harmless at first, but the frequency of these outings began to raise some serious red flags. Then there was her phone. She'd take it everywhere, even to the bathroom. I tried to dismiss my suspicions, but the secrecy around her phone use was too much to ignore. I caught her texting late at night when she thought I was asleep, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. I wanted to trust her, really I did, but the feeling that something was wrong grew like a cancer in my mind. One Friday evening, I decided I'd had enough of the wait-and-see approach. I told her I'd be home late from work, giving her a chance to go out without me. I wanted to see if she'd really leave the house. I parked down the street and waited. It wasn't long before I saw her. But it wasn't just Sarah getting into a car, it was her getting into a car with another man. My heart sank. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man was tall with dark hair, and I recognized him as Jake, a guy from her office. They didn't seem to be in a hurry or worried about hiding their actions. They laughed and chatted like old friends, and just like that, all my worst fears were confirmed. I felt rage course through my veins, and a sense of betrayal that I hadn't prepared for. Part of me wanted to storm over there and confront them both, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I drove home, every bump in the road echoing my anger. How could she do this? How could she betray me so easily? As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by a wave of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and feeling utterly helpless. I went through the motions of dinner, but I couldn't taste any of the food. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, like I was watching someone else's life play out on a screen. When Sarah finally came home, she was cheerful, the kind of cheerful that made me nauseous. I barely looked at her. I couldn't stand the sight of her smiling face. She prattled on about her night, how much fun she had with her friends, but I saw through the facade. Inside me, a storm was brewing, and I knew that as soon as I confronted her, it was going to explode. I waited until we were alone to bring it up. "You went out with Jake tonight, didn't you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Look on her face was priceless, shock followed by immediate defensiveness. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I was at the bar with Emily." I called her out, reminded her of the very details I had witnessed. Her reactions were a mix of anger and elaborate lies. She insisted I was mistaken, accused me of being paranoid. She tried to manipulate the conversation, flipping it on me, claiming I never trusted her. It felt like I was in a twisted version of a game show, where I was the only contestant who didn't know the rules. As the confrontation escalated, I felt the emotional weight of our marriage crashing down around me. I was devastated, seeing someone I loved twist the truth so effortlessly. I wanted to scream to make her feel as hurt as I was. But instead, I found myself retreating into silence, overwhelmed by the betrayal. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. I kept replaying that moment over and over in my head, each time feeling a little more hollow. I lost interest in everything I once loved. The more I thought about her lies, the more I realized that my entire life had been built on a facade. I needed to figure out what to do next, but every time I thought about confronting her again, it made my stomach turn. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey towards understanding the depths of her deception and my own heart. Days passed in a blur of anger and confusion, and I found myself buried in thoughts about Sarah's betrayal. I had never felt such an overwhelming mix of emotions. I couldn't sleep, hardly ate, and went through my daily routine like a zombie. Max, our dog, could sense my distress, often nudging my hand with his nose, trying to pull me out of the abyss I had fallen into. I knew I had to confront Sarah again, but I was terrified of the outcome. Would she continue lying? Would she try to manipulate me further? I decided that I needed some tangible evidence to solidify my case. I couldn't be caught off guard again. That weekend, I set my plan into motion. I'd seen the way Sarah protected her phone like it was the Holy Grail. So, while she was in the shower, I took a deep breath and grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I unlocked it. She'd left her passcode written down in her desk drawer for emergencies, or so she'd said. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, praying that I would find nothing incriminating. But then I saw it, texts between Sarah and Jake that were so flirtatious, so laced with innuendo that I could hardly breathe. They talked about meeting up and how much they missed each other. I felt bile rise in my throat. I tried to stay calm, knowing that I had to keep my cool for the sake of my plan. I couldn't let her see how deeply this hurt me just yet. I took screenshots, saving everything I could find, and put the phone back just as she stepped out of the bathroom, her hair still damp and wrapped in a towel. My heart raced as I tried to act normal, like nothing had changed. But inside, the anger was boiling over. That night, after a long, silent dinner, I decided to confront her again. I wanted to give her a chance to come clean, to see if she would own up to her infidelity. I sat her down and took a deep breath, feeling like a lawyer preparing for the trial of the century. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She immediately tensed up, sensing my seriousness. "What now?" she asked, irritation creeping into her tone. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshots. "How long has this been going on, Sarah?" I asked, feeling a sense of satisfaction in finally having the proof I needed. Her face shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to anger as she tried to deny everything again. "This is a joke, right? You can't be serious," she exclaimed, defensive and scrambling for excuses. She tried to twist the narrative, claiming those messages were just harmless flirting, nothing serious. "Harmless? You're meeting him behind my back and you call that harmless?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You're lying to me, Sarah. This isn't just flirting, it's cheating." The confrontation escalated quickly. She resorted to name-calling, trying to paint me as the villain for invading her privacy. But I refused to back down. I felt empowered by my discovery, even as my heart shattered. As the argument raged on, I realized that Sarah's true colors were shining through. She was manipulative, and every excuse she made was a desperate grasp at saving her own skin. I felt sick as I listened to her, anger turning to sadness as I began to accept the reality of our situation. The emotional impact of the confrontation weighed heavily on me. I had always believed in our love, but now I was faced with the ugly truth. Our marriage had been built on lies. I felt like I was losing a part of myself along with it. In the days that followed, I oscillated between anger and despair. I spent sleepless nights contemplating what to do next. Could I really stay with someone who had betrayed me so deeply? Or was it time to cut my losses and move on? I felt lost in a fog, unsure of which path to take. I started talking to a close friend, Mike, about what was happening. He was supportive but blunt, urging me to take a stand for myself. "You deserve better, man. You can't let her walk all over you," he said one evening over beers. His words resonated with me, igniting a flame of determination. I knew I had to make a choice about my future, but the fear of the unknown was paralyzing. Every time I thought about confronting her again, my stomach churned. But I couldn't let her continue to play me for a fool. I needed resolution, whether that meant working through our issues or walking away for good. I was done feeling like a victim of her games. Little did I know, the decision I made next would change the course of my life forever, leading me down a path I never expected to traverse. The days after my confrontation with Sarah felt like a blur, but I slowly began to reach a point of clarity. My emotions fluctuated between anger and sadness, but the one thing I knew for sure was that I had to take control of my life. I couldn't let Sarah's lies consume me any longer. I started to strategize my next steps, determined to find a way to reclaim my dignity and self-respect. As the week dragged on, I found myself obsessing over the texts I had seen. Each time I reread them, the hurt returned like a tidal wave. But I also began to see the cracks in Sarah's facade more clearly. Her stories were riddled with inconsistencies, and every time I replayed our conversations, I saw how she had manipulated the truth to keep me in the dark. It made me furious, but it also fueled my resolve. One night, while laying in bed with my thoughts racing, I made a decision. I would not confront her again for the sake of drama. Instead, I would quietly gather evidence and start to build my case. I wanted to know the full extent of her betrayal before making any rash decisions. This felt like a dark game, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the one finally gaining control. I began to pay closer attention to her patterns, tracking her movements and the times she claimed to be working late. I even started to follow her a few times, just to see if she would meet Jake again. It was a sickening feeling, lurking in the shadows like a jilted character in a thriller movie, but I needed to know the truth. One evening, I followed her to a swanky bar downtown. I parked a few blocks away and walked to the entrance, my heart racing with both anticipation and dread. I took a deep breath before stepping inside, scanning the crowd for her familiar face. It didn't take long to find her, laughing and flirting with Jake at a corner table, both of them lost in their own little world. My blood boiled as I watched them interact. They leaned close, sharing secrets and lingering touches that made it clear their relationship was far more intimate than Sarah had ever admitted. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but I couldn't look away. I snapped a few pictures on my phone, knowing I needed proof for what I was beginning to consider. Maybe it was time to confront Sarah one last time, but this time with undeniable evidence. After what felt like an eternity, I left the bar, my hands trembling. I had recorded every detail, but the weight of watching my wife with another man settled heavily in my gut. I drove home in a haze, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal. When I walked through the door, I was overwhelmed with emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of empowerment. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I would be armed with the truth. Later that night, Sarah returned home. She was in a good mood, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I waited for the right moment, building my courage with every passing second. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Hey, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "Can we talk?" She looked up, surprise evident on her face, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Sure, what's up?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken. "I saw you with Jake. You're dating him, aren't you?" Her expression transformed from confusion to disbelief, then to anger as she tried to deny it. "This is ridiculous. You're barking up the wrong tree," she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. But I wasn't backing down this time. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I have the proof right here. You can't talk your way out of this anymore." As the confrontation escalated, she resorted to her usual tactics, manipulation and blame shifting. "You're going to believe some photos instead of your own wife. You're paranoid," she shouted, trying to flip the narrative, but I wasn't buying it. I pressed her, demanding to know how long this had been going on and why she felt the need to betray our marriage. It felt like a dam had burst, and all the pent-up emotions from the past weeks flooded out. "I trusted you, and you threw that away for a fling," I yelled, feeling the anger rush through me. "What do you want from me? An apology? Because I'm not going to pretend this isn't happening." As the argument wound down, I noticed the cracks in her carefully constructed defenses. For the first time, it felt like she was on the defensive rather than the other way around. Her bravado faltered, and for a moment I could see the guilt flicker across her face. "Fine, I admit it," she finally snapped, her voice taut with frustration. "I was lonely, okay? You barely pay attention to me anymore. It just happened." Her confession cut deeper than I anticipated. I felt a mixture of relief and devastation wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but it felt hollow. I wanted to scream at her, but I also felt a wave of sadness crashing down. Everything I thought we had built together was crumbling around me, and I couldn't believe we had reached this point. I stood there, feeling the weight of our marriage hanging in the balance. "So what now, Sarah? What do we do from here?" I asked, my voice trembling. I knew I had reached a crucial point in my life, one that would define my future. I had to decide what was more important, saving what was left of my marriage, or walking away from a relationship built on lies. The choice loomed large in front of me, and in that moment, I realized I was standing at a crossroads that would change everything. The atmosphere in our living room was thick with tension after Sarah's confession. I felt like I had just been hit by a freight train. The weight of her admission hung in the air, and I was grappling with the reality of what our marriage had become. It was surreal. Standing there with the woman I once believed I knew completely, now exposed as someone who had willingly betrayed my trust. "Are you seriously blaming me for this?" She shot back, her voice dripping with indignation. "You think I wanted to cheat? You never pay attention to me anymore. You're always at work or glued to your phone. I felt so alone, and Jake was there for me." The words stung. I had always been focused on our future, working hard to provide, but I felt like I had let our relationship slip through my fingers. The anger that had been fueling me began to wane, replaced by an overwhelming sense of sadness and betrayal. I looked at her, once again navigating that murky emotional landscape, feeling like we were both lost in a fog of our own making. "Sarah, you could have communicated with me instead of seeking comfort in another man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the torrent of emotions. "We could have worked through this, but you chose to lie and sneak around behind my back." For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression shifting from defiance to guilt. I could see the cracks in her armor forming as she realized the gravity of her actions. "I didn't think you'd understand," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "That's the problem," I shouted, the frustration bubbling to the surface again. "You didn't think, you just acted, and now look where we are." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was standing on shaky ground, and I knew this confrontation was just the beginning of a long road ahead. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked finally, my voice softer now. "Do you want to fix this, or are you ready to throw it all away for something that might not even last?" Her eyes darted around the room, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her mind. "I don't know," she admitted, the bravado slipping away. "I love you, but I also don't want to feel alone anymore." It felt like a punch to the gut. Here we were, two people who had once vowed to love each other through thick and thin, now grappling with whether our love was strong enough to withstand such a betrayal. I wanted to scream that love was supposed to be a two-way street, that intimacy and trust were built over time, not shattered in a moment of weakness. "Why Jake?" I asked, needing to understand what had driven her to this point. What was so special about him? "He's charming," she replied defensively, crossing her arms. "He makes me feel wanted. It's not like we planned it, it just happened." "Just happened doesn't cut it, Sarah," I said, my voice rising again. "You made a conscious choice to be with him, to keep it a secret from me. That's not just a mistake, that's a betrayal." She flinched at my words, and I felt a twinge of guilt for how harshly I was speaking, but I couldn't stop. The pain I felt was too great, and I needed her to understand the depth of my hurt. "I don't even know what we are anymore," I continued, pacing the room, feeling the walls closing in. "How can I trust you again after this?" "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll go to therapy, I'll be open with my phone, whatever you want, just don't give up on us." Her pleas hung in the air, and I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think we could rebuild what was broken, but the other part was screaming that the wounds were too fresh, too deep. Trust once broken is not easily mended. "I need time to think," I finally said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I can't just jump back into this as if nothing happened." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered, though the defeat in her eyes made my heart ache. I could see that she was scared, too, frightened of losing everything we had built together. In the days that followed, I spent more time away from home, trying to sort through my feelings. I stayed with Mike for a few nights, needing the space to breathe and think. He was supportive but firm, urging me to consider my options. "You deserve someone who respects you, man," he said over a beer one evening. "If she can't offer that, maybe it's time to cut bait." The thought lingered in my mind, but every time I thought about leaving, I felt a pang of regret. I loved Sarah, despite everything, but love alone wasn't enough to hold our marriage together. I started to weigh my options. The thought of going to couples therapy was daunting, but I realized it could provide us both with the tools to either rebuild or finally end things on healthy terms. But would Sarah be willing to commit to the process? Could I trust her to follow through? I didn't know if I could face the possibility that she might not be serious about wanting to save our marriage. One evening I returned home, heart heavy with uncertainty. Sarah was sitting on the couch, eyes red from crying. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, looking up as I walked in. "I want to make this work. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you I can change." I knew this was the moment of truth. Should I give her another chance? Was our marriage worth fighting for? As I stood there, I realized I had to make a choice, to either embark on a journey of healing together or let go and begin anew. The stakes were high, and I felt the weight of that decision pressing down on me. As I stood there, staring at Sarah, I felt the enormity of the decision I had to make. My heart was a battlefield of emotions, torn between love and betrayal, hope and despair. I had always believed in the power of love, but now I was faced with a harsh reality. Love alone couldn't fix what was fundamentally broken. "Really?" I asked, my voice shaky. "You're willing to put in the work, because if we're going to do this, I need to know you're all in." She nodded fervently, her eyes pleading. "I am. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy, be transparent about my phone, communicate better. I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I took a deep breath, weighing her words. The reality was that I loved her, and part of me wanted to believe that we could rebuild our marriage. But I also knew that trust, once shattered, was a fragile thing. "Okay," I said slowly, "but this is going to be easy. There will be rules and there will be consequences if you break them." "I understand," she replied, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "Just tell me what you need from me." We spent the next few hours discussing boundaries, setting expectations, and laying the groundwork for rebuilding our relationship. It felt like we were navigating uncharted territory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both walking a tightrope. We agreed to start couples therapy, and I insisted she continue individual counseling as well. I needed to see that she was genuinely committed to understanding her actions and improving herself. I also made it clear that she needed to cut ties with Jake entirely. No more contact, no more excuses. As the days turned into weeks, we began to establish a new routine, one that included therapy sessions and open discussions about our feelings. There were moments of tension, and Sarah struggled with the emotional fallout of her actions. I saw glimpses of her vulnerability, and I hoped that she was beginning to understand the magnitude of her betrayal. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, we sat on the couch, the air thick with unspoken words. "Do you really think we can fix this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I want to believe we can," she said, "but I know it's going to take time and I don't want to rush it. I want to earn your trust back." "I want to believe you too," I replied, feeling a mix of hope and skepticism. "But it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm still stuck in that moment when I found out. Ghost haunting me." "I understand," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost and I took the wrong path." I squeezed her hand, wanting to believe that she was truly remorseful, but the nagging doubts continued to linger in the back of my mind. I had to remind myself that healing takes time and patience, not just from Sarah, but from me as well. As the weeks wore on, I noticed subtle changes in Sarah. She was more attentive, making an effort to reconnect with me and communicate openly. However, I also caught glimpses of her frustration as she grappled with her own emotions. It was as if we were both learning to navigate a new landscape, one filled with uncertainty and raw vulnerability. One night, after a long discussion about our future, I felt a flicker of optimism. Maybe we could emerge from this stronger. As much as I wanted to believe in a happy ending, a tiny voice deep down warned me that the past could resurface at any moment. It was during one of those therapy sessions that the therapist suggested we explore the underlying issues that had contributed to Sarah's infidelity. It was a pivotal moment for both of us. We were encouraged to dig deeper into our emotional connection, our communication styles, and our individual needs. I listened intently as Sarah expressed her feelings of loneliness and neglect. She admitted that she had felt sidelined while I focused on work, and I couldn't deny that I had let my career overshadow our relationship. It was difficult to hear, but I knew it was crucial to confront the truth. As we began to peel back the layers of our relationship, I found myself reflecting on my own shortcomings. I had always prided myself on being a good provider, but I realized that I had neglected the emotional aspect of our marriage. I had taken for granted the importance of connection, intimacy, and communication. It was a painful revelation, but one that I knew we needed to face together. After several weeks of intense therapy, we reached a crucial turning point. We had learned to communicate more openly, and I could sense that Sarah was genuinely trying to change. But I also knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, filled with moments of doubt and pain. One afternoon, while we were sitting on the porch, I turned to her. "How are you really feeling about all of this?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that I've ruined everything and that we might never be able to go back to the way things were. But I also want to fight for us. I want to show you that I can be better." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I want that too, but it's going to take time. I still have my moments of doubt, and I can't promise that it'll be easy." "I understand," she said softly. "I just want to be honest with you from now on. No more lies, no more secrets." As I looked into her eyes, I realized that while the road ahead would be difficult, there was a glimmer of hope. We were both committed to working on our relationship, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. But I knew one thing for certain. The journey to rebuild our trust had only just begun. I had to keep my guard up while also allowing the possibility of healing. In that moment, I understood that love could be messy, but it could also be redemptive. The weeks turned into months, and the process of rebuilding our marriage began to feel less like a battle and more like a shared journey. Therapy sessions became a regular part of our lives, a safe space to explore our feelings and confront the issues that had been buried for far too long. There were still moments of tension and emotional flare-ups, but we were learning to communicate more effectively, to express our needs without resorting to blame or defensiveness. One evening, after a particularly enlightening session, Sarah and I found ourselves sitting on the couch, reflecting on how far we had come. "You know, I never thought we'd get to this point," Sarah said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "I thought we were done for good." I looked at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and love. "So did I admitted. But honestly, going through this has forced me to confront my own shortcomings too. I realize now how important it is to prioritize our relationship." She nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We both have things to work on. I don't want to keep bringing up the past, but I also don't want to pretend it never happened. We just have to keep moving forward." As we went about our daily lives, I noticed changes not only in Sarah but also in myself. I was making a conscious effort to be present, to listen more, and to show her the affection she had craved. We started going on regular date nights, trying new hobbies together, and even took a weekend trip to reconnect. The laughter that had once been absent began to filter back into our home, slowly stitching together the pieces of what had been broken. One afternoon, while we were preparing dinner together, I turned to her with a playful smile. "You know, I think we might just make it after all." She laughed, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "You think so?" "I do," I replied, feeling a sense of hope blooming in my chest. "It's a long road, but I can see us getting stronger every day. We're actually talking about things instead of sweeping them under the rug." We continued cooking, the atmosphere light and playful. It was a stark contrast to the heaviness that had once enveloped our home. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, realizing that despite the pain of the past, we were both committed to healing together. However, the specter of Sarah's infidelity still lurked in the background. I would be lying if I said I didn't have moments of doubt. There were days when I'd catch myself wondering if she was being truthful, if old habits would rear their ugly heads. But I learned to manage those feelings, to communicate openly with her about my insecurities. She was patient and understanding, reassuring me with her commitment. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to her. "I still have my moments of doubt," I confessed, the words escaping me before I could stop them. "But I'm learning to trust you again." "I know," she said, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes. "And I'll keep proving to you that I'm here for the long haul. I can't change the past, but I want to build a future we can both be proud of." As the months rolled on, we continued to grow together, tackling challenges as a team. We attended more therapy sessions, each one uncovering deeper layers of our relationship. It was a difficult process, but one that ultimately brought us closer. I learned to appreciate the beauty of vulnerability, of being open about my fears and insecurities, and Sarah learned to communicate her needs without resorting to betrayal. Eventually, we reached a point where the pain of the past no longer overshadowed our present. I remember the day we both realized it together. We were sitting at a cafe, sipping on coffee and sharing stories, when I caught a glimpse of her smile, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Wow," I said, suddenly struck by the moment. "I think we've actually made it." Her eyes widened in surprise before she broke into a soft laugh. "I think we have. I feel like we're finally free." Free, that was the perfect word for it. We had shed the weight of our past, no longer defined by the betrayal that once threatened to tear us apart. Instead, we were writing a new story together, one that was rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and a commitment to growth. As we walked hand in hand back to the car, I felt a sense of peace settle in my heart. It had been a long journey, and there were still challenges ahead, but I knew we were stronger than ever. Our love had been tested and scarred, but it had also grown deeper and more resilient. Looking back, I realized that the affair had forced us to confront the issues we had buried for years. It had stripped away the layers of complacency and forced us to rebuild with a newfound understanding of what it meant to truly love and support one another. As I drove home, I felt a sense of hope for our future. I knew that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of our story, they would no longer define us. We were ready to embrace the next chapter together, hand in hand, stronger than before.